Okay, good morning. Welcome. When the folks organizing this called me a couple months ago, I was like, well, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to come. And I was expecting 20 or 30 people. And they called me a couple weeks ago and asked how many books I had. And I said, well, they hadn't come in yet. And they said, well, we're expecting at least 400 to 500. So my compliments. So I guess I gotta, since we're gonna be talking about a very tough subject today, it's always good to kind of start with something light, okay? This happened a year ago. I live over in Ridgecrest and up on the side of the mountain. It's near Black Mountain. And my daughter and I were watching TV, and flanking either side of our new TV or windows, we can see the valley for 60 miles. And there was a thunderstorm crossing over by O-Team, about 6-7 miles away. So there's not a cause and effect. I mean, it's not like hitting Black Mountain. It's quiet in Black Mountain. Storm off in the distance, and suddenly, pop. The whole valley goes dark. My daughter's sitting next to me. Daddy? And I'm like, cell phone works, we're cool. It gets a lot better. About 30 seconds, a minute later, phone rings. And it's a very nervous, I'll keep him anonymous, not my college president. It was another administrator. And he's like, this isn't it, Bill, is it? I was like, yeah, it is. No, I reassured them that don't institute the drill and the practice, everything is cool. And then the phone rang for the next hour. And the typical message was, you rotten son of a... You know, my husband's down in the basement screaming, this is it! Would you tell him it's okay? I mean, I go downtown the next day and people are throwing rocks at me. I guess it had an impact on Black Mountain. I won't repeat what one person said. Anyhow, the way I like to do something like this is, I just like to sort of talk for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, tell you a little bit about how the book got started, some of the things that have happened since. But then I definitely want to open it up to discussion, question and answer, whatever. Folks organize what? These are our question mics right here? These 2 microphones right here? Yeah, okay. I can always start and finish something with Abraham Lincoln, even though I'm in North Carolina. So, one of my favorite quotes from Lincoln is, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present, and the occasion is piled high with difficulties. We must rise to the occasion. Lincoln delivered that on December 1st, 1862, during the darkest days of the Civil War. When it seemed like all hope was lost for the Union cause. And yet he then went on to speak about what America would be 50 or 100 years hence. And it's a remarkable speech when he's talking about what will America be like in the year 1900? What will America be like in the year 1962? And we have to focus on the future of our grandchildren, which I believe is what unites all of us together today. So much of this is not about us, it's about the world we want to provide for our children and grandchildren. How I got into this, 7 years ago, I was up in DC. Yes, I work with Newt Gingrich. No, I'm not going to talk about the current situation. I will say this though, Newt is one of the most brilliant men I've ever worked with in my entire life. And he is the only current candidate who has openly spoken about issues like this, particularly EMP and what's known as CME, which is created by a solar storm, and our need to be prepared. I'm waiting for Newt to talk about a book about the Civil War, and he is late for our meeting. He comes in with a Navy type next to him. He's very upset, tosses his attaché case, and makes a rather rude comment about when is Congress going to wake up about EMP? And I'm sitting there and I look up at him. I said, you mean electromagnetic pulse? He looks at me, he's like, how the heck do you know about it? And I was like, well, I did study the history of military technology. At the end of that evening, the gentleman who was with him, Captain Bill Sanders, wrote the afterword for the book, 1 second after. He's a very close friend. He's one of our nation's top experts on nuclear warfare issues. Both of them were urging me, think about writing a novel about this. Newt set up a meeting with Congressman Roscoe Bartlett. How many have ever heard Roscoe? A great hero, representative out of Maryland. This is his top issue. I go to meet Roscoe, and he said something that has stuck with me ever since. He said, Bill, the problem with the issue of EMP is there's no constituency. And he's right. He said, it sounds like sci-fi. Most of us, we talk about it, oh, you mean that Mayan stuff. Now, let me give you one example about how constituency works. Do you know that a year and a half ago, Congress passed a bill outlawing the ownership of chimpanzees? Now, which is very reassuring to me. There's a couple of folks here, if I ever drop over your house, I don't have to be afraid, okay? You don't have to be afraid at my house anymore. Now, I do have a killer parrot, but no, I don't have a killer chimpanzee. Now, we all know the real, and there is a legitimate reason, that horrible tragedy of a couple of years ago where the woman was attacked and her face was just absolutely destroyed. But that created a constituency. It was national news. Everybody was paying attention to it. And so a bill got passed. Now, do you know how much it costs to pass a bill? It goes into the millions. But an issue that affects all of us, nobody cared about. So Congressman Bartlett asked me to write the book as well. I just want to talk about that just for a couple minutes. I drive back home to Black Mountain, North Carolina. It's about 1 in the morning. My daughter was about 11 at the time, and I go to peek in on her, and I will unashamedly admit I burst into tears. Sat in my living room. Yes, I poured a scotch, and I just sat there staring for a couple of hours of, what do I do, God? What do I do? For the next year, the story kept kicking around, and I'm researching. And let me just share one research experience. How many of you were living here when the 2 hurricanes crisscrossed over us back in, it was 04? My old man was fighting out the last months of his life, going out the way a cavalry trooper goes out. My father was pre-World War II mounted horse cavalry, and he was putting up one heck of a gallant fight. And they called me from the nursing home the evening the storm dropped about 20 inches of rain on Black Mountain and blew out the whole infrastructure. And I go to the nursing home to help out, and they're on emergency generators. And I'm sitting there in that half-glow light of an emergency generator, and I'm talking with a nurse, and I asked her, if everything goes down, I said, well, that's impossible, Bill. The emergency generator is hot wired in, as you know. And I'm thinking, yeah, and that means a major EMP event will blow that as well. What happens in this nursing home if the power blows completely? What happens to my father's respirator? Well, we have bottled oxygen. Well, what happens when we run out of bottled oxygen? And it chilled her. She said, we give you one of those squeeze balls. I said, okay. So I would sit next to my father until I become so tired, I stop. And then I watched my father die. Is that it? And she got pretty upset. She said, what are you leading to? And I told her, and she said, Bill, half the residents in this home will be dead within hours.